Matrix is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of Shorts with Liz Clark.
Well, hello, welcome back to Shorts with Liz Clark. Today's episode is a little different than from where most of our guests come from the health and fitness industry in that space. I am thrilled to introduce someone from a different corner of the association world, but one very familiar to me. Michelle Korsmo is the president and CEO of the National Restaurant Association. And while her work focuses on food service and hospitality, she and I share a deep connection through our careers in association management, public policy, and advocacy here in Washington, D.C. We've both spent decades working at the intersection of industry and government, leading organizations to serve broad essential sectors in the American economy. Michelle is a seasoned association executive with a strong voice for her industry. And today we're going to talk about the power of associations, the misunderstood nature of lobbying, and how dealing in a complex political climate requires clarity, courage, and a whole lot of collaboration. It's a timely and refreshing perspective I'm excited to share with you and to welcome my friend Michelle. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Liz. I'm so glad to join you, although I was a little thrown when you talk about our decades of experience, which is true, but how does that happen? It goes so fast.
It really does. I know.
Especially when you're having fun.
Yes, we're having fun. Exactly. When you represent great industries and everything's evolving as quickly as our members are doing it, it makes it fun to try to keep up with our members, I think, right?
For sure.
So talking a little bit about association work and the strategy there. How would you describe association work at a high level today? And maybe how has that evolved in recent years?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about associations, we all fundamentally do the same things. As you've said, we provide advocacy for our members, first and foremost, so important. And associations are really the best place for that advocacy work to happen. And so really critical, the advocacy work that trade associations do. Second, trade associations provide networking opportunities and experiences so that you get to know the other leaders in your industry. And really exciting on a national level because people get to know leaders across the country, and there's so much learning that happens there, which goes into the third pillar, and that's really the education work that happens, education about the industry, also career training and education that happens within trade associations. And then the fourth thing that I would talk about that's so important associations do, and that's the standard setting. So a lot of times I think associations really have an important role to play of bringing together all of the industry leaders to talk about the problems that they're facing and then create standards that allow for everyone in the industry to really know what success looks like, or in some cases, it's tools that are important for an industry to use across the industry where it's beneficial for that to come out of a neutral trade association instead of a for-profit company. So that's kind of the basics from my perspective on what trade associations do. You asked the secondary, really interesting question, and that's how is that role of trade associations changing and evolving? And I think that for trade associations to really provide strong value for their members going forward, you're thinking about the strategy from a sector perspective. So you're thinking about what's happening in our sector, what's happening in our industry that is changing the way business will have to take place and is putting different pressures on our work. And so the trade associations that will thrive in the future, from my perspective, are the ones that help their members really see around corners and understand what's coming next in terms of challenges and what's coming next in terms of opportunities. And when you do that, when you're doing it well, really great things happen within that association in terms of finding solutions for their members.
I love that. And what you said about standard setting, I think is something that the HFA really is going to be doubling down on in the next year. We're an industry that is evolving so quickly, and you just look at seeing around the corner, even issues with us like GLP-1s and what is that for the future of our industry. These are all really important, critical, but fast moving issues that we're trying to stay one step ahead to enlighten our members on. So I'm happy to hear.
We're having those same conversations about GLP-1s and how they're impacting the restaurant meal experience and what people are looking for. So all of those external factors are the things that when those conversations are happening within associations, there's a lot of synergy for finding solutions, and in a much different and I think often more productive way than if it's individual companies trying to solve those problems for themselves. I'd
Yeah.
also add, and you and I have talked about this, Liz, that one of the things that associations can do is be that platform that has the conversation, but then steps back in terms of finding that success pattern often. Because usually it's being able to talk with your members about all of the different pressure points in the industry and what all of the various solutions are, and then letting individual member companies really decide which path makes the right sense for them to be effective. So there's that delicate balance between determining what an industry solution to challenges would be that are association driven, and then what those solutions are that need to be individually selected by the businesses as they go out there and compete. And that's part of what makes our jobs a little bit more complex.
Yes. Well, let me ask a clarifying question back on GLP-1s. Is the Restaurant Association talking about administering GLP-1s at restaurants? I hope I know the answer, but
The answer is definitely no.
okay,
No, that is not a conversation that I've heard come up.
okay, good. Maybe like GLP-1 menus, maybe that's a different conversation, but yeah.
Well, and definitely, as people are seeking just smaller portions, anyone that's on a GLP-1 is seeking smaller portions, but they're still looking for that connection and community that happens in restaurants that's so important. So restaurants are trying to figure out, how do we cater to a GLP-1 customer in a way that gives them what they're looking for.
Yep, a lot of commonality we have, I would say. So what are some of the biggest challenges that associations face when you're trying to serve both your member organizations and the broader public interest?
Yeah. It's interesting because, I think every association leader will tell you there's always an important filter for us to use in thinking about, is somebody pushing and promoting ideas because it's good for their business and it gives their business a distinct advantage, or is this something that's important from an industry-wide perspective or a public interest perspective, as you talk about? And first and foremost, I think for the boards of national associations, it's really important, or even a state association, it's really important that when you're in those board seats, you really take off your business hat and you put on your industry hat, and you're thinking about long-term decision making and long-term solutions. When we think about it in terms of the public interest, I think that there's always really that economic argument to be made about, if it's not in the public's best interest, it will not be long-term good for any particular industry. So I don't find as much conflict in the public interest with the interest of the industry long-term. I think it's just more managing individual businesses, looking at their business model and how that may be particular to them. And so from my perspective, I think it's always important that we put through a filter in policy making decisions about what's the right long-term decision to make that provides for an environment that allows for the most optionality and the most competition to thrive within an industry. Because frankly, thriving competition in an industry makes an industry really strong.
When you say long term, what does long term mean to you?
Long term means to me like 10 years. Does this hold up 10 years from now? Does this hold up 20 years from now? It's hard to think 10 and 20 years in the way that the world is changing so quickly. But when I think long term, I'm thinking, I use the phrase internally. Let me back up. I use the phrase internally. Will future us be glad we made this decision, right? Is future us going to be glad that we did the things that we're doing today? And that can be very small in terms of how we're setting governance or operating procedures, or it can be large in terms of how we're promoting specific policy examples. So sometimes long term is shorter, and like 3 years, 5 years, but I think the further you go out and think, does this endure, are we going to be happy with the decisions we made, the easier it is to answer that question of yes or no.
Yeah, and that's going to help me this afternoon in other meetings I have on our bylaws. And will the
Yes.
future us be glad that what we did today? So I love that advice.
Future us.
Love it. Um, So you and I again have been around sort of the lobbying advocacy space for a long time, and I think that for especially people outside of Washington, the view of lobbying has a bit of a negative light. And how would you explain the role of lobbying as a form of activism on behalf of an industry, without essentially, as I call it, the scarlet L, that so many of us wear?
Yeah, I know. I remember when I was young and always loved politics and policy setting. The thought of making a career as a lobbyist was probably not the most popular, but I will tell you, having built my career in this industry, I could not be happier about that decision in terms of feeling like I'm giving back and feeling like I'm doing work that makes a difference in the world. We all want to do those things where you're helping your community, where you're giving back, where you're able to leave the world better than you found it, right? And I think lobbying actually does that in a really important way. And so let's kind of break down what's the basics in terms of lobbying. Lobbying is about building relationships. And when you think about the people that are setting public policy, be it at the federal level, either through members of Congress or even in an administration from a regulatory policy level, to what's happening in any individual state or even in localities, what your county is doing, what your city is doing. In all of those cases, people that are making these policy decisions are dealing with a huge array of issues that come in front of them that they have to make decisions on. And to expect any one of them to really know and understand kind of the details and the intricacies of that business is unrealistic, right? It doesn't make sense that they would know that. And I think we all know, in every association that I've had the privilege of being a part of, um, the members of that industry always feel like if people really understood what we do, this would be a lot easier. And this is really where lobbying comes in. If they understood how complex it is to run a health and fitness business and all of the different pressures that they're facing, the different requirements that they have to deal with, the overhead costs, like all of those things that go into it, that people don't think about in the same way. Lobbying actually allows you to do that. And so, first and foremost, it's the work of helping the people that are making the policy understand better what how those policies impact any of the people that are affected by that policy. And then let's think about how you share and spread that information. We all know how important it is to have a high level of trust with the information that you're receiving. And we see this when we think a lot about news sources, especially now as the way people get their news has changed so much. Like, which are the trusted sources? Which are the trusted news sources? I think the same is true with lobbyists. Who are the trusted lobbyists? And the way you build trust is relationships. And the way you build those relationships is long-term repeated interactions with people, and you're getting to know them, what's important to them, what they care about, what they're trying to achieve, and they get to know us, what we care about, what we're trying to achieve, what our background is, the complexities of the business, how that business is supporting their communities, all of those things that are involved. All of that is built through a relationship. And so fundamentally, lobbying is about building relationships so that you have an environment where you trust the person that's giving you the information, and then being able to give that information to them in a way that helps them understand how the different policy initiatives impact their business.
Yeah, and it's really easy to build the relationships. I think, right, so many of our members are so busy running their businesses and they think, oh, well, just somebody else is going to do the lobbying. And no, the lobbying is educating these decision makers and building a relationship. And so it's a lot easier than I think a lot of the industry gives itself. They intimidate themselves sometimes.
Yeah.
It's like, right? Like, no.
And also break it down. Like, it doesn't have to be, I'm a lobbyist, that means I'm going to start wearing designer shoes and wear out the shoe leather on marble floors in Capitol Hill. Like,
Yeah, I'm only
if
wearing
you
sneakers these days to the
you're
hills.
wearing sneakers, we love that.
Yeah.
Sneakers to the hill is all a great thing, and definitely a nice way that the world has evolved. But the reality is, you can start doing that, and it's important to do that at the local level. And when you think about whether you've got a business that's covering a state or a region or just one town and one county, you still need to build relationship with those policymakers. And it's as easy as, going to one of their events. I think about my early days lobbying. There weren't a lot of people in those city council meetings. There weren't a lot of people in any of those regulatory meetings. The people that show up get time and attention, and people talk to them. Why are you here? What are you interested in? What do you want to know? And there's also, again, when you think about the people that are policymakers, they are interested in learning about what's going on. So there's really a great space to invite them into your business. Hey, why don't you come over sometime and meet the team and meet the people that are working there? And let me show you the back of the house. You can kind of understand how the business works. You're in a great place because people either love gyms or they aspire to love gyms and fitness facilities in both cases, and are curious. Restaurants are a great thing. Everybody loves to go to a restaurant and see how all of that magic happens. And so building relationships locally is the perfect place to start. And it's also great because a lot of those local city commissioners become legislators. Those legislators become members of Congress. Sometimes become cabinet members, sometimes become president of the United States, right? So those relationships can really start at the local level and make all the difference.
Yeah, and I think what you and I have in common, right, is also some of those local legislators or even bigger, broader ones, go to our facilities, they go to our restaurants, they go to our gyms, and which is really a differentiator, I think, from a lot of industries. It's a leg up that I believe that we have as
it's a leg up, but at the same time, we get a sense. You'll hear restaurant operators say that they get sometimes frustrated because policymakers think they understand how restaurants work because they eat in a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
Right. So just because you work out a lot doesn't necessarily mean you understand the business of fitness centers. But it's just like because you eat out a lot does not necessarily mean you understand the business and the business pressures of restaurants. And so what we have, because I think you're exactly right, is the familiarity that breeds, in our case, I think familiarity breeds affection. And so they have that positive attitude and the positive affection. And then it's our job to take that positive goodwill and then turn it into greater understanding.
Yeah. Yep. So true. So how do you balance, though, when you're lobbying for like a real specific industry need that the industry and that your businesses and that your members want, with sort of maybe broader social or economic concerns, when maybe sometimes those things are not aligned?
Yeah. This is where I go back to my what's future us going to be grateful that we do and say. And I think that when you're advocating for something where it doesn't make that same broader social or economic sense, I think that there's real questions to ask about why. Like where's the disconnect? What's happening, and then figure out, should our policy position be different, or is our assumption about that broader economic good or public policy good actually accurate? And so figure out kind of what's going on. So whenever I'm in a place or a position where I can't make sense of what's the right policy position because it doesn't seem to be either kind of popular in terms of fitting popular culture, or it feels like it's in conflict, like you're saying, I think that's the time to dig deep and really try to understand, all right, what is our objective in the policy that we're trying to promote? And then what is the initiative from a larger public perception looking like, and what is that outcome going to look like in terms of the public good? So anytime there's a conflict, right, the answer is dig deep, go back to the basics. What are you actually trying to achieve? And then figuring out what's the best long-term solution that creates the most opportunity in terms of choices for the operators, in terms of potential benefits for employees, in terms of public good for your customer base, and then allows for a broad array of competition to exist.
Yeah. Yep. Keep your North Star. Yep.
Right.
So again, now you and I have been in a lot of policy sort of fights and debates, not amongst each other. Thank goodness.
Thankfully, yes.
Yeah. But oftentimes I think that there's an important role for coalitions when there's various sort of issues and hot button policy issues. What's your take on coalitions?
I think coalitions are invaluable because it's important for you to be able to express the value of policy from a larger perspective than just your own. And coalitions really allow you to do that because often you'll find groups all agree on a policy perspective, but usually for different reasons because of a different way that that would impact their business. And so being able to bring all of the coalition partners to the table, talking about their perspective as individuals and then talking about the larger perspective as a whole, I think it's good. It also helps policymakers understand just the groundswell of support behind larger issues. So being a part of a coalition really makes a difference in their sense of, okay, everybody really wants this, or a majority of people are looking for this, or various types of businesses are supporting this policy and this process. And frankly, the larger the support base is, the easier it is for policymakers to make clear decisions about what's the right thing to do. Yeah, I think coalitions are invaluable.
I agree. So when you look at the overall political climate, right? And again, DC is one of these cities where the pendulum swings so aggressively, and to
Yes.
be nimble and flexible is really important. But when you look at today, the current political climate that we're dealing with, are you finding it sort of polarizing for your industry, opportunities for your industry? And does this current climate provide an opportunity for the association to engage with lawmakers in maybe a different or more impactful way?
Yeah, so many things in that question, Liz. I think no question that it's really important for trade associations to almost rise above the winds of party politics, right? So every association has members of both or multiple political parties that are members of your association. And so you're really there to advocate about the policy that's best for your industry and not necessarily the policy that's best for one party or another. And I think that one of the things that we've seen in the shifting political dynamics is that natural coalition of, you know, the Republican Party being kind of always in support of businesses in the business community has dramatically changed. And that isn't something that any association should take for granted, that there's, you know, one party, the Republicans may be more for business than not, or the Democrats may be more against business than not. And I think what we've found, and frankly, I found in every association I've been a part of, it's those going back to those personal relationships with individuals so that they understand what you're trying to do, why you're promoting the policy you're promoting. And you're going to find natural allies on both sides of the aisle. And you should always start from the assumption that there are allies for your industry, for your association work on both sides of the aisle. And I think the other thing that we need to think about now, in particular, as we lobby, I think the days of lobbyists going in and saying, hey, you know, we really want this tax provision because it makes a big difference in our industry, and somehow it's basically choose our tax provision over somebody else's tax provision. I think that pick us over the other people that are asking for things, those days really should be behind us in terms of the level of sophistication in the messaging that you're conveying, because it doesn't make sense to me to go to a member of Congress and say that you like this industry better than another industry, because that isn't an honest request, really. And so I think that what we all should be doing is going into all of our potential allies and supporters and talking about what the implications are to various policy initiatives, both the good and the bad. And I think that the lobbyists that go in and say, hey, here's the upside and here's the downside, and you know, yeah, we want this, and if we get this, then the trade-off is that there's less of that. The ones that are talking about that more directly, I think, earn more trust. It helps the policymaker feel like there aren't going to be surprises that they're unaware of when they're making decisions. And it feels a little bit more like a partnership, that we all want the same thing at the end. And that's a strong, healthy, vibrant economy with, you know, healthy, strong communities. And I say these words not even talking about fitness health, but just in general, we're always looking for healthy societies and healthy economies. And so find those partners.
Yeah, you just said something that I think is really interesting, and it's almost the vulnerability of being able to admit, hey, what's the downside? And I think, again, going back to creating a relationship with these people, they're relying on you as you're an educator to them of this policy holistically, right? So it's really easy for us to sell, sell, sell. Here's all the upside, upside, upside. But I think that the more vulnerable you are about, but here's the downside here, I think the more that that builds trust and creates a longer term, better relationship. And but it's something that I don't see all industries doing.
Well, it's hard to do because you feel like, oh, if I give them a reason to not vote for this, they won't. But I also think that that's naive to not realize that there are people that are opposed to whatever policy position we're advocating, or even the ones that aren't proposed that want their initiative to go forward over ours. If we're talking about tax provisions, there's only so many dollars for any of those provisions in any one bill, as we just came through the reconciliation process, right? Of course, there's going to be people on the other side, and so why don't you help define the way you see the downside instead of letting somebody else define what your downside is for you?
Yeah. Um, so Michelle, since you've stepped into this leadership role at the National Restaurant Association, which I believe you and I might have started around the same time,
And,
is that what has surprised you the most about how the organization operates behind the scenes?
and that's such an interesting question because I think the things that surprised me weren't really surprises in terms of the fact that they were there. I think the intensity is probably where I'm the most surprised. And I'd say there's probably two things that were the biggest surprises. One is just the vast nature of the restaurant industry. And again, I knew that there are all kinds of different categories and types of restaurants. I knew that we have everything from the, culinary masters to the local diners that we serve as the National Restaurant Association. And they have very different interests and very different perspectives on the business and what needs to happen. But just in terms of just the vastness of the size of the types of restaurant uh, concepts and categories, and then the types of individuals that work and live and prosper, frankly, in the restaurant industry, and how we serve all of those and do that well is, again, not terribly surprising, but the intensity of it was much more than I had really kind of thought through. So that's one. And then the other thing that kind of partners with this, to use the phrase partnership, which I think is important, is the importance and critical nature of those state partnerships, right? So with our organization, the National Restaurant Association, we have a broad network of state restaurant associations that we work closely with as we develop policy and work to advocate for our members and work to provide services for our members. They are, like so many state organizations, all their own entities. They're their own legal organizations with their own boards that have their own agendas and own priorities. But we work together really well, and we continue to work to make sure that we work together really well to share information, to talk about the work that we're doing, both from an advocacy perspective and certainly as we work together on the products and the policy and business and training solutions that we're providing for our members, and the networking that we do as an association. And that state partnership, when that's strong, it makes all of us stronger. Right. We're much more effective from an advocacy perspective when we are engaging our state associations in what's happening at the federal level. Like, we're primarily responsible for the work that's happening at the federal level, but that doesn't mean we do it without the state associations engaging, because often they have broader and deeper relationships with many of these members from their home state at times than we do. And certainly those operator members are the best lobbyists, the best relationships that we have. And vice versa. I think we really can help the state associations in the way that we provide a platform for sharing information and doing research and providing resources when they have state advocacy issues that are popping up that also happen in other states. So the more that we're sharing and working together on those state issues, with the states primarily responsible for that work, the stronger we all are, and the more the restaurant industry thrives.
Yeah, I think having a strong state army is really important. We at Health and Fitness aren't organized that way. We have state alliances, which is a
Yep.
little bit different, but also all true. Everybody at the ground level there with deeper relationships and can react in more real time is so important to leverage.
Yeah.
Another partnership that actually our industries share, and I'd love to get your thoughts, is a little bit on the franchise model, because obviously you have so many franchise folks in your space, and so do we.
Absolutely.
And how do you
Absolutely.
interact there?
Well, this is back to coalition work, and we love working with the International Franchise Association and the work that they do to defend the franchise model and show the value of the franchise model in the U.S. And to our economies. And so it's back to when we have issues that matter to our members, working together makes us all stronger. And we both come at it from a slightly different perspective because of the way that we're looking at it with our primary mission. Since our primary mission isn't just franchise, it's all restaurants. And since in the International Franchise Association, they're dealing with restaurants and other businesses like fitness, they're able to talk about it from a different perspective, but really add to that conversation. We also do a lot of work just in terms of helping the networking and relationship building with our members between the associations. So it's been great to have those coalition partners. I've long said in my work in associations, we're not competitive with other trade associations, right? That's additive. The competition is really thinking about the policies and the information that would hurt the health of the restaurant economy, right? Long term, that's the most important thing for us to think about defending. It's not. It's not a binary choice when you look at association work.
So I think to that point, right, you look at what NRA's role is in advocating for restaurants and the hospitality sector, but there must be some misunderstandings that maybe come with that. Can you speak to maybe some misunderstandings that people might have on the advocacy front?
Well, an easy one that we have that I know you have in the fitness industry is that people think that these are all big businesses, right? So they're seeing the names that may be big national names and forgetting that there's local owners there that are providing not just for their family, but all of the people that they employ in that community, the things they're doing to give back in that community, and really the small business nature of the industry. And so understanding really the people behind the brand names and how local that is, how community based that is, I think is really important. And then understanding just the complexity of making it in the restaurant industry. This is, as everybody knows and has long said, the restaurant industry is a tough business, right? Traditionally, what we've seen through our data is that the average profit in a restaurant is 3 to 5%. Right. So large percentage of the business is small business. 80% of restaurants have fewer than 50 employees. So really, small businesses with really tight margins, tight profit margins, and increased labor costs, increased food costs, all of those things make a huge difference in a restaurant's ability to be successful. But the other thing that exists in restaurants that's part of a misperception is the level of opportunity and the great way that people can build careers in the restaurant industry. So one of the things that we love to talk about in the restaurant industry is just that low barrier to entry and the ability for people to start. It sounds cliche, except for the fact that I have probably half of our board started working in a dish room or working as a cook or something that you would not think of as a path to being an owner, an executive, but in the restaurant industry that is very much the case. And so it is a place where you can get into the business and really build a career and build success. And the fact that there are 70 different types of career pathways that exist in the restaurant industry. It's not just you're a server or you're a cook or you're a dishwasher. It's really thinking through all of the IT requirements. And we all know marketing increases, in need and importance in any of our consumer facing industries. It's the interesting supply chain management work that's happening as the world and the business continues continues to get more complex and we have to manage those things. So all of the opportunities to build careers in restaurant industry is something that I think is this kind of misperception of of the business generally.
Yeah, we have again more similarities that I look at our industries, and it's people that work at the front desk checking people into the gym. It's people that run group exercise classes. It's personal trainers. All of these people that start with a passion in the industry and grow on, to eventually to open a small business of themselves.
Yep.
It's really a
Yep.
phenomenal opportunity. But we both spoke of something, and that is labor. And I think that when you look at NRA and how you've adapted your approach to major events, right? Like labor shortages, like the pandemic, like
Yep.
shifts in consumer behavior. How do you adapt your approach when you look at big, big rock issues like that?
So every year our board gets together and we talk about where we think the challenges are going to be in the future for the industry. What are we thinking the big issues are that we're going to have to be dealing with 5 years from now? And then based on those big issues, what should we be doing today? What should we be focused on that creates that industry imperative for success? And in that process, we establish industry imperatives. And this year, we've established 2 industry imperatives for restaurant success. One is empowering a future ready workforce, and the other is finding breakthrough efficiencies. And so if we think about those 2 things, it goes to just what you said. There is no doubt we are all trying to find the best workforce we can out there, and we don't have enough workers, right? We don't have enough people working in the industry. There's still 800,000 job openings in the restaurant industry today, so a need for more people to work in restaurants. And so, how do we find and attract people to work in restaurants? And one thing that we know is the majority of people working in restaurants are under the age of 35. One thing that people under the age of 35 talk about in terms of what they're looking for in work is an opportunity to grow in their jobs, and also places that are using technology and training their employees. And so, if we can talk to our members about the importance of how they bring technology in to make work easier for the individuals that work in the restaurant, and how do you use and create training programs that help all of the employees in your organization really build the skills that they're looking for in the future. And as we get into a much more, I don't care what business you're in, much more technologically driven business, it's important for us to think about how we're empowering the workers to have the skills and knowledge they need to keep up with all of these changes. So that's critical. And then the efficiencies that we need to find as we embrace, a lot of these technology changes, certainly with AI and the other things, which are those things that bring efficiencies into the business to help release some of that pressure on already tight margins.
Yeah. So um I want to close here in a second on looking ahead, but before I do that, I want to risk of nauseum of looking behind, because I think everybody so sick, right, of looking behind. But I know our industry really looked up to the restaurant association, the restaurant industry during the times of pandemic, and said, wow, well, they've gotten relief, and what is it that they're doing that we're not doing? And I think that we've wrestled with a lot of those questions in time, but I'd love your sort of perspective of what it is that you did in that time. And again, you came in a kind of a crazy time, I did too, but to muddle through that and to put the association and the industry on strong footing moving forward.
Right. So I was with the wine and spirit wholesalers during the heat of the pandemic, and then came to the National Restaurant Association as all of those mandates and closures were really waning. And so the bulk of the work that the association had done on behalf of its members was pre-me. But I will tell you, certainly from my experience at Wine and Spirit Wholesalers and what I know about the team and the focus that they have here, it goes back to those relationships and lobbying, because I think, well, let's take it this way. I think that we all should think about that old adage that you don't build relationships in a crisis, right? So we came into a complete crisis mode very quickly as a country. And in that, everybody was trying to figure out what to do. And so the advantage of being there, building those relationships long term, and then the crisis comes in, and then you're able to manage through that crisis in a way that was very effective for its members. It may help your members to know that the restaurant industry certainly didn't get everything that they were looking for. We do feel let down by Congress when they said we're funding the restaurant relief fund, but we know that this isn't adequate, but let's just put that out there and see what the marketplace looks like. And then we'll come back and fully fund that. When it came time to come back and fully fund that, they said, we're done spending money on the pandemic, and they cut that off. And so there are hundreds of thousands of restaurants out there that didn't get that restaurant relief that they had really been promised by Congress in that environment. So we got a lot for our members. We're really proud of the work that we did. We're really proud of the ability to help the restaurants sustain through a just monumentally difficult time as it was for the fitness industry, in a way that you weren't able to do takeout, right, in the same way that restaurants were able to do. So it's certainly dramatic, but I always go back to that, relationships aren't built in a crisis. You make hay when the sun is shining, if we can use all the cliches. So investing in the relationships now, even when you feel like you don't need to, is important, because you don't know when that crisis is coming. Right? You can't predict when that's going to happen. And you're going to be glad that you made hay when the sun was shining, so that when it does start to rain, you're able to do the work that you need to for your members.
Okay, so in closing, looking ahead, I guess I'd say, what is one policy area or advocacy effort that you think will define the next chapter of the association work, or for the restaurant industry, all the future things that today's us will be glad for? What are the things that you're excited about?
Well, I actually, we can do a whole podcast on the fact that I think that the way people work is changing dramatically. I think that the amount of information that any one person, particularly, when you think about knowledge workers, which is really where we are in the association space, the amount of information that any one knowledge worker is processing in a day continues to increase. And so the production method with which we do our work really needs to get sharper and change. And so when I think about from an association perspective, what I'm excited about, it's the work that we're doing today as a team, thinking through how do we change the work we're doing so we can really focus on those things that provide great value proposition, building frameworks and structures within our processes for providing that value proposition, and then scaling that so that we can reach as many people as possible and engage with them in easy, frictionless ways where it becomes obvious how they can benefit from being a part of the association.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time today. It was really fun to be able to sit down and talk work. And I know we have the pleasure of having lunch, and things around town, but I really know that our members are going to really appreciate and take a lot from this, a lot of great learnings. And you're just a tremendous leader, and really honored to have you with us today. So thanks so much for your time.
It has been my pleasure. I appreciate so much the partnership and the coalition work that we've been able to do together, and knowing that that partnership continues as we have so many shared interests is fantastic. And I look forward to us, getting in a good workout and then going to have a nice meal.
Well said. Okay, great to see you. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Liz.
Matrix is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of Shorts with Liz Clark. With over 20 years as a dedicated supporter of the fitness industry, we're thrilled to continue a partnership geared towards success for all those who believe in better.